Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Thursday Sangha gathering. My name is Jody, and I am the director of KTC SoCal. Happy to see you all here tonight. This evening's program is presented by Lama Kathy, continuing her series on Mingyur Rinpoche's book, Joyful Wisdom. You can find out more about KTC SoCal by visiting our website, ktcsocal.org. Additionally, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, KTC SoCal, to hear all of our past teachings. If you would like to make a donation this evening to Lama Kathy, you can do so on our website. And if you would like to become a member of KTC SoCal, there's information on different levels of membership as well. Before I hand it over to Lama Kathy, please mute your microphone so there's no background noise. Thank you. And now I will hand it over to you, Lama Kathy. Thank you so much.
Hello. Thanks so much to everyone for inviting me to be here this evening. It's great to see everyone, especially on this day, because today is the eve of Chutrul Duchen. And Chutrul Duchen is the holiday associated with the Buddha, the Shakyamuni, the historical Buddhas, miracles that he performed during his lifetime. As you know, the Tibetan religious calendar has 4 major holidays. And these 4 major holidays are associated with 4 of the 12 deeds of the Buddha. Those of you who are familiar with Buddhist prayers may have seen the Buddhist prayer entitled The Praise of the 12 Deeds of Shakyamuni, which talk about the 12 major events of his life, including his birth, death, enlightenment, and so on. And each of these 12 is listed in this prayer. Well, 4 of those 12 have special days set aside for them. And these special days are called Du Chen in Tibetan. Du, D-U, means time, and Chen means great. So it's often translated into English as the great occasion of this or the great occasion of that. And the 4 holidays begin during the Losar period. Lo means year and Sar means new. And we've just recently celebrated the Tibetan Losar, or New Year, starting on March 1st. And so the first 15 days of Losar are associated with this particular incident in the life of the Buddha. There are other incidents in the life of the Buddha that are celebrated later in the year, but the first one is Chu Trul. Chu means dharma, and Trul means activity. Chu Trul Duchen, the great occasion of the Buddha's spiritual accomplishment. And so it's associated with this incident that happened in the life of the Buddha after his enlightenment and before his passing. He was challenged to a debate by Buddhist scholars. I'm sorry, I said Buddhist scholars. I mean non-Buddhist scholars. And these non-Buddhist scholars thought that they could trap him and win the debate and thereby win his followers, because in those days, the practice of debate was a winner-take-all situation in which two sides would debate, this person with their followers and this person with their followers, and whoever won the debate got to claim the other person's disciples. So it was a very high-stakes event for the Buddha Shakyamuni to undertake this debate, but he did. And for 15 days, he performed a miracle every day. And in performing this miracle every day, his debate performance won the day, and he was able to defeat the non-Buddhist scholars. Now, I don't know whether he laid claim to their followers or not, because I have a feeling that their philosophies still survive. But in any case, the idea is that the Buddha was able, through his superior spiritual attainment, to perform miracles on the daily for 15 days. And that is why this is sometimes called the waxing moon of miracles, because the first 15 days of the new year follow the waxing moon. In fact, tonight, I am told there will be a lunar eclipse. And I don't know if it's visible from all of the United States or not, but I know it will be visible here. And so I live in Ohio, so I'm in the Eastern time zone. Apparently, it's going to start somewhere around 11 o'clock, which might be earlier for you if you're on an earlier time zone, and later for you if you're in a later time zone. That if you have a clear sky, the moon may appear to turn red. So it's going to be an interesting lunar event. So in any case, we have a lot going for us in that the first 15 days of the new year are blessed by the Buddha's miracles. Therefore, anything that we do during that first 15 days has, I guess you could say, more impact from a blessing and karmic point of view. This also means you should avoid negative actions during this time, as they also can be amplified. So tomorrow is the formal holiday to commemorate this. Now, the next holiday, just in case you're curious, I have my list here. The next holiday, should you be curious, is going to be Sagadawa, which can be spelled Sakadawa. And this refers to the moon, during which the Buddha attained enlightenment. So Sakadawa, that is going to be Wednesday, June the 11th. So you can mark your calendars for that one. Wednesday, June 11th will be Sagadawa, the day commemorating the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing into nirvana. So those three occasions are summed up in Sagadawa on June 11th. The next one after that will be Monday, the 28th of July. And that's going to be the holiday known as Chukor Duchen. Chu means Dharma and Kor means wheel. So Chukor Duchen is the time when the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma, his first teaching. It commemorates his first teaching. So you can set that day aside as a special day for practice. And then the final, the fourth day of those four great occasions is called Hlabab Duchen. Hlab means God, and Bab means literally to fall. Hlabab, but it refers to the Buddha's descent from the God realm, where he had gone to give a teaching on the Abhidharma to all of the gods, including his mother, who had been reborn among the gods. And so that will be on Tuesday, the 11th of November. Tuesday, the 11th of November. So now you can mark your calendars and say to your boss, "Hi, boss, can I have a personal day with pay? It's my religion." I don't know whether that will work for you or not. It doesn't always work. But we have some of our folks who have gotten days off for the major Buddhist holidays, which is really interesting. And they come to the KTC because we have during that time we have prayer services. And so if you want to get up really crazy early, like at 6:30 tomorrow morning, you can join our Zoom. We will be on Zoom at 9:30 Eastern time, which will be 6:30 a.m. Pacific time. Maybe that'll be a little too early for you. You can check our newsletter to get the Zoom link for that. In fact, I wonder if I still have the Zoom link for that here. Do I still have that? No, I don't. I'll put it in the chat before the end of the evening, in case people want to get up at an extremely early hour tomorrow to pray with us. All the prayers will be put on screen. I know because I'm the Zoom host for tomorrow, so that will happen. So thanks for letting me go on at length about Buddhist holidays. I figure that since the time is blessed by the Buddha and it makes whatever we do more effective, then it's probably going to be a good opportunity for us to at least take a little time out to make offerings to the shrine and to practice some mantra or some meditation. Okay, now on to the other topic. The other topic is our continuing study of Joyful Wisdom by Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche. And we are now in the chapter, let's see, the chapter number 11, in which he is called Making It Personal. For those of you who have the paper books, we're going to be starting on page 231 with step 2, try something different. As you know, Mingyur Rinpoche has spent the majority of the book talking about how to develop your meditative awareness. Awareness being that part of the mind that experiences things. And he has spoken at length about how becoming aware of our awareness can be a method of meditation that helps us to understand how thoughts, feelings, emotions, and other experiences arise in the mind. And the previous chapters have dealt with shamatha, calm abiding, the various methods of becoming aware of one's thoughts, for example, and learning how to notice and let go of thought, and then in noticing and letting go of thought, practicing the capacity to be able to let go of thoughts when one is not meditating. And he's spoken earlier in the book, he's spoken about his own experiences with anxiety and depression and how overthinking situations caused him to feel panic, and how the practices of calm abiding, shamatha meditation, along with let me see here, the Vipassana exercises called Insight were able to help him with his anxiety and depression. And then he became a teacher for others. And so he's talked at length already about how to practice placing your attention on an object such as sound, or placing your attention on an object such as form, and allowing your attention to rest on that, and that when one's attention wanders, one brings back the attention to the object. We learned this as breath awareness meditation at the KTCs from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, who taught us shamatha meditation based on breath awareness. So being aware of the breath as it comes in, being aware of the breath as it comes out is our method, the method that we use to learn how to become aware of our own thoughts, feelings, emotions, and awareness itself. And so noticing and being able to return your attention when your attention wanders is the real work of meditation. We've talked about this numerous times during our many classes together on this book, that the key skill that we are learning in shamatha meditation is noticing when we are no longer meditating, noticing when our attention has wandered, and then gently bringing our attention back. And so Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a teacher of the previous century, called this touch and go meditation. When you place your attention on an object, it stays there for a short period of time, but then it begins to wander, maybe into the past, maybe into the future, maybe it circles around in the now. But in any case, the attention wanders from the object. And when we notice the wandering, we stop, we comment thinking, we label the distraction thinking, and we drop it, and then consciously and gently return our attention to the object for a fresh start. And this gentle return over and over again is the work of meditation. And what we learn by doing this over and over again is a gentle attention. We place attention and then we replace attention and we replace attention again and again. And we attempt to do so without judgment and without anger, without frustration, and with a big dose of kindness to ourselves. And by doing this over and over again, we learn how to be gentle with ourselves. And next, after talking about shamatha, he began to talk about working with thoughts. And after talking about working with thoughts, he talked about working with emotions. And so chapter 11, how talked about the main exercise, which is to, number one, to notice what we are feeling and identify it. I'm sad, I'm lonely, I'm angry, and so on. Then he's in the book, he says, we practice ordinary attention every moment of every day. We're always saying things like, that's a cup, that's a book, and so on. So we're already labeling things. And so why not use this same technique for emotions? Instead of falling into the habit of being drawn into the story that accompanies the emotions, the story, why has that person said that to me? Why did that person do that to me? And so on. Instead of being drawn into the story, we instead step back and identify the feeling first. And then he said, after you identify the feeling, you bring your awareness to it. And he says the second stage involves meditative awareness, approaching thoughts and emotions as objects of attention through which we can stabilize our awareness. And so then he says, whatever you are feeling, whether it is panic, anxiety, loneliness, or whatever, the basic approach is to try to watch them as though they were bubbles floating away. And he says, try to watch any of the smaller bubbles with the same sort of attention that you are watching a physical object or focusing on a sound. So I thought this was kind of an interesting idea. He basically said you can think about this and allow, he says, as you look with meditative attention, the complex emotion becomes like a bubble inside of which there are many smaller ones. And he says, whatever you are feeling, the basic approach is to try to watch any of the smaller bubbles with the same sort of attention that is applied to watching a physical object. In doing so, you'll probably notice that the thoughts, emotions, and even physical sensations shift and change. So that means that when you identify the feeling and observe it as though you were observing something floating away in space, he says, after a while, he says, for a while, you might feel the emotion more persistently. After a while, perhaps after a few minutes, the bubble within the bubble pulls your attention. Focus on that with meditative attention. In doing so, gradually your attention will shift from identifying as being swallowed up in an emotional bubble to being the one watching the bubble. Remember, I was talking about being caught in the story. Instead of using the word story, he calls it bubble. So instead of being caught in the story of the emotion, you allow yourself to stand aside from the emotion and look at it as though from the outside. I kind of like the idea of a bubble, though, because a bubble can float away and even pop and disappear completely. So he said, when you do this, there are three things that can happen. He says, sometimes you'll see after you have allowed this bubble to disappear, he said, what may happen will be one of three things. One, the problem that you're having or the emotion that you're having disappears altogether. But then the second thing that could happen is that it gets even bigger. And then the third thing, let's see here. Whoops. The third thing that could happen is that it neither gets worse nor gets better. It stays the same. And he said either one of these three is a different way, represents a different way of working with emotion. Rather than becoming afraid of our emotions, we just observe them as though from the outside. So by observing emotions, he said, we become the looker or the watcher who is watching these emotions rather than being swallowed up inside them, or as he says, being inside the bubble. So that's what we talked about last time. So that gives you just a little review of where we started. Tonight, he's going to talk about something else. And he says the second exercise is to try something different. The first step is entitled the main exercise, but it really has to do with engaging emotion with meditative awareness. Engaging emotion with meditative awareness, labeling it, and then standing and watching it as though from the outside. And then the second exercise is called try something different. And so then he says, the previous exercise is great. He said, but he said the problem that some people have, he says in the beginning, it can be difficult to immediately address strong emotions or biases that have developed over long periods of time. And he gives the example of some of his Dharma friends who have had long-standing emotional difficulties. Maybe they feel loneliness. Maybe they feel sadness. Maybe they feel intense anger about things. So he said that one of his students said that trying to conquer his biggest problems was like trying to climb Mount Everest before we have even learned how to climb a small hill. And so he said, bearing in mind that the goal of shamatha practice is to develop stability of awareness, I offer people the advice given to me by my own teachers. Rather than trying to tackle powerful or long-term emotions, we should focus instead on something smaller and more manageable. He says, for example, he talked to a woman who was suffering terrible feelings of loneliness, and he instructed her to try to meditate on this. I said, it's okay to teach her to use emotion as a support for her attention. But she came back to him and said, I tried my best, but I just can't look at this feeling of loneliness as though I was outside of it. She said, whenever I try, I feel overwhelmed. So I advised her to go back to the basic exercise of attention practice, turning meditative focus on form and sound. And then she said, I don't even know how to meditate on form or sound. So he realized that she needed some remedial instruction. So I gave her the basic instructions on paying meditative attention to form and sound, which means when you are looking at a form, you place your attention on the form. And then when your attention wanders, you gently return it. And you can do the same with sound. If you hear sound, you can gently return your attention to the sound when your attention wanders. And so he had her do the same thing with emotion. And so he said, after we practiced these methods for a while, he said, I took a chance and taught her to focus on smaller emotions, such as the irritation she felt standing in line at the grocery store, or the frustration she might feel confronting a pile of dirty dishes in her kitchen sink. He said, try this for a while, and then maybe you'll have the strength to look at the larger emotion of loneliness that's troubling you. A few months later, the woman wrote back to him and said, after working this way, I'm now able to start looking at my loneliness and make friends with it. And so then he asks, how was she able to make this change? And how do we go about making an effort in this direction? He said one method is to generate by artificial means an emotion, something simpler and small and not so intense. For example, if you're working with a big emotion like loneliness, he said, try working instead with anger. Imagine a situation in which you're having an argument with a coworker who messed up your files or something, or someone who cuts ahead of you in line at the store. Once you begin to feel that feeling of anger, he said, try to use that to try to focus your awareness. Focus on the feeling of anger, the words that cross your mind, or the image of the person ahead of you. Practicing in this way, you can gain experience on how to deal with the emotion. So this is very similar to an exercise that's taught in The Great Path of Awakening, the book on the top of that stack over there. In The Great Path of Awakening, Jamgon Khantrul says that while you're on your meditation seat, that's a good time to work with smaller emotions first. And so he said, when you're sitting on your seat, consciously bring up a minor emotion, such as irritation, or such as mild anger, or mild frustration, the frustration you might feel about not being able to accomplish a task, and so on. Then he said, when that comes up, he said, work with your remedies. And of course, those of you who know, in Jamgon Khantrul's book, The Great Path of Awakening, the remedies he has you use are the remedies of loving kindness and compassion. When you feel the mild irritation, you think, may my mild irritation contain the mild irritation of all beings, and may I and all beings be free from this irritation. That's the loving kindness and compassion response to an emotion. Here, Mingyur Rinpoche is encouraging people to merely turn their attention to the emotion and look at it as though they were looking at it from outside. So sometimes when we are caught in an emotion, it's like we're in a spiral going down the drain with that emotion and becoming involved in the story of the emotion. But what if instead, when we feel that mild irritation that we have caused to come up in our artificial meditation, we cause this feeling of irritation to come up, then we look into the emotion with our attention. And when we do this, sometimes the emotion will get stronger, but sometimes the emotion will disappear completely because we've changed the vantage point. We're no longer the victim of this emotion. We're the watcher of the emotion. And so that's also something you could do on your seat by generating a bit of minor irritation and then looking into it. You can also alternatively look at the one who's feeling it. Where's the self that is looking at that? So who's feeling that emotion? Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche taught us that one. Very early in his time teaching us at Columbus KTC, he said, emotions can be very interesting. He said, if you work with them. He said, for example, he said, if you have a mild emotion, he said, this won't work with the big ones, but he said, with the mild ones, he said, when a mild emotion comes up, ask yourself, who is feeling this emotion? And then go look for the mind that's feeling it. Or sometimes he'll say, look for the person, for the being who's feeling that. And you won't see anything because there's nobody there. And so I think what he was trying to accomplish with that was, again, to get us to step outside the emotion and the story of that emotion. Because when we're caught in the story, it's so easy to be overwhelmed. So if we can just use mild emotions and work with them and find them to be workable, then that gives us a little bit of a feeling of accomplishment, a feeling like, oh, maybe we can do something with our emotions. So this is the second method, which is he calls try something different, which means that we, instead of trying to address our big emotions, try working with the small ones first by causing them to come up on the meditation seat, labeling them, and then allowing them to float away like a bubble. So then let's see here. There's another way he said you can do this. And he said another try something different approach. He says, let's see. He says, when you go to the gym, you don't start off by lifting heavy weights. He says you begin by lifting weights that are manageable. Gradually, as your strength improves, you can begin lifting heavier weights. Drawing attention to emotional states works the same way. He said, while there is some benefit in addressing large or long-standing issues directly, sometimes we have to build up our emotional muscles a bit more gradually, remembering that the goal of attention practice is to develop stability of our awareness. So he says another try something different approach involves using the physical symptoms of an emotion as the object of meditation. For example, he said, a woman attending a public seminar confessed that she had suffered from years from severe depression. She had been taking medication, but she couldn't escape the feeling that her body was filled with burning lead. Where do you feel it? I asked. All over, she said. It's overwhelming. Okay, I told her, instead of looking at overall pain, focus on one very small part of your body. Maybe your foot, maybe just your toe. Choose a small place to direct your attention. Look at small parts of your body one at a time, instead of trying to work on your whole body at once. Remember that the goal of shamatha practice is to develop stability of awareness. Once you've achieved stability, by focusing on your foot or your toe, you can begin to extend that to larger areas. And so then he goes on to say, applying attention to smaller emotions or simply focusing on form or sound or physical sensations, meaning you take your attention away from the story and look at the feeling in your body, for example. He said, this develops your capacity to look at long-term overwhelming emotional states. He says, once you begin to grow your attentional muscles, you can begin drawing attention to larger issues. As you do so, you may find yourself directly confronting the underlying, remember what he called mental afflictions? He called them Buddha nature blockers. The idea is that we have Buddha nature, but our Buddha nature is blocked. We can't see it. We can't experience it because we have all these overlaying difficulties. We have confusion, habitual tendencies, we have emotional states, we have karmic accumulation. We've got a lot going on. And so as a result, he calls those Buddha nature blockers. He says, as you do so, you may find yourself directly confronting your own underlying Buddha nature blockers of self-judgment, for example, or judging others as enemies. He says you may unravel the belief in being stuck or the blind spot that inhibits your awareness of your potential. He said, almost certainly you will confront the myth of me, or the myth of self, the tendency to identify with your loneliness, to identify with your low self-esteem, your perfectionism, or your isolation. He said, it's important to remember that such confrontations are not battles, but opportunities to discover the power of the mind, the same mind that can create harsh judgments is capable of undoing those harsh judgments through the power of awareness and attention. And this reminds me of a story that I frequently tell. So you have to be patient with me if this is one you've heard before. But I remember visiting another state. It's not here in Ohio, where a person was getting ready for an interview with Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. And the person said, I have a problem I want to talk to Rinpoche about, but I'm not sure how to go about it. Will you help me? And I said, I'll pre-interview and I'll tell you whether your question is clear enough for the translator. And the person said, okay, my whole life I have had this feeling. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the person's whole life they've had this feeling. That the person said, I've had this feeling that everything I do is going to fail. And I said, oh my goodness, really? Your whole life? And they said, yes, my whole life. I can't seem to shake it. I said, but you went to college. You got married and had children, and you have a successful business. And the person said, I know. All of those things are true, but I still have this nagging feeling inside me that everything I do is going to fail. And I need to ask Rinpoche's help with this. And I said, wow, okay. I said, I think you've stated it perfectly. I don't think you need to say it any different way. I think the translator will understand you. I said, would you mind if I give it a shot? And the person said, sure, because the person said, I'm going to be talking to Rinpoche anyway, and Rinpoche will give me the definitive answer. And I said, great. Well, here's what I'm wondering. I said, so since this is a thought you've had for a very, very long time, I'm wondering if maybe you've accidentally, completely without intention, you've accidentally begun to identify with the thought. So much so that you and the thought are now confused with each other, that you've been thinking that for so long that it's become a habitual way of looking at yourself. And that maybe this habitual way of looking at yourself may not be based in fact. That the facts of your life don't match this feeling, and therefore maybe it's a good time to start questioning this feeling that you're having. And maybe it's just something that you've said for so long that you're not sure who you would be if you weren't saying this to yourself. And I could see the person's eyes were starting to get like really scared. And I said, look, you don't have to give up this feeling today. You don't have to give up this idea, this thought, everything I'm going to do is fail. Everything I do is going to fail. You don't have to give this thought up today, but I just want you to consider that perhaps it's become habitual, but it has no basis in fact. And so then the person went into the interview with Rinpoche. And then later, I saw the person later. I said, well, what was the answer? And the person said, he essentially said the same thing you said. He said, and then he said a bunch of other stuff, and it really became clear to me, he said. And later, I learned, this is totally independently, because I didn't ask about this person's problem to anyone, but the translator said to me, you're never going to guess what happened in an interview today. Khenpo Rinpoche used a person's problem to give them pointing out to the nature of mind instructions. So, and I'm like, I know who that was. Anyhow, I didn't say, but I said, oh, really? That's amazing. And so what essentially happened, because they didn't say who it was and I didn't say who it was, so there was no, problem there. But it was really interesting to me that what Mingyur Rinpoche is essentially saying in this book and what happened to this person is essentially the same thing, that if we begin to let go of a long-standing belief, at first it seems unnatural because we've always felt that way. We've always thought that. But if we can let it go, there's some space, even if we can just let it go for an instant, like that person did when they were considering who they would be without that thought, right? And they started getting scared of, how would they be without that thought? But the person entertained that notion. They entertained the possibility that that thought may be habitual, but not based in fact. And by thinking like that, something opened up for them. And then Rinpoche just basically walked through the door and said, here is your mind. Your mind is without color, without shape, without location, without beginning, without end, which is something that a person can say to someone when there's a gap, and give the idea about what mind really is, which is unestablished and yet aware. So I just realized I've been going on now for too long. But this is as far as we're going to go right now. Especially, I got a big kick out of the pairing this story, which I've been telling for years, with this particular part of the chapter. He says, where he says, you may unravel the belief that you're being stuck. You may actually start unraveling it by letting go of the story. You may actually begin to unravel the belief in being stuck, or the blind spot that inhibits your awareness of your potential. Almost certainly you will confront the myth of me, or self, the tendency to identify with your feelings. So he says these are not battles, but opportunities to discover the potential of the mind. So even just entertaining the notion of who you might be without these habitual, overwhelming thoughts is just really amazing. He said the same mind that can create these harsh judgments is also capable of undoing them through the power of awareness and attention. So I think we'll stop here, and then next time we'll talk about there are two more exercises. Step 3 is about stepping back, and step 4 is about taking a break. So we'll see if we can't address one or both of those next time, and then that will take us through this first part of the chapter. So these are all like exercises that you can do, and working with your own thoughts and emotions. It's like sometimes people look at their problems, and the problems get bigger as they look at them, but the opposite can also happen if you're able to take them apart and cut them down to size. So let's see if there's any questions about this. This is a really amazing material, because it shows us that behind all of these different thoughts, feelings, and emotions, there is mind, the basic nature of mind, which is and what the Karma Kagyu tradition talks about in the Mahamudra teachings. They talk about mind being limitless awareness, or empty luminosity, and so on. And those are very powerful statements about how mind is. But what it really boils down to is that mind cannot be seen as a material thing, but it's not nothing, because it knows things and experiences things. So let me get my notepad out here and see what folks might want to talk about this evening. I'm going to have to go off camera for a second here to grab that. See if I can do that without, yeah, here we go. All right, got it back. So what do you think? Questions, thoughts? We'll use, let me go back to the gallery grid here so that I can see if anybody has their hand up. Okay, not seeing any. So maybe what we should do instead then, if there are no questions, then we could just sit and do some of the practice. I'm going to use the instructions from the Great Path of Awakening, since I'm much more familiar with those. And they're incredibly similar. So let's do that. I was just talking to somebody about this recently. For those of you who are not familiar with the Great Path of Awakening, let's see here. It's a book that is about the 59 mind training slogans of Chikawa Yeshe Dorje. Okay, let's see here.
Lama Kathy, can I ask you something while you look for that?
Sure.
So it's interesting when you were telling the story about the woman who wanted to ask Rinpoche that question and would it be asked right? What popped into my mind was watching a interview with the Dalai Lama, and there was someone who was explaining to the Dalai Lama that they were depressed. And to watch the interaction between the Dalai Lama and his interpreter, it went on for a while because the Dalai Lama didn't understand what being depressed is about.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I always wanted to find that again. And that always comes to mind a lot, especially when you bring up a story like that.
Right.
Asking one of our teachers or one of our, Tibetan teachers, a question like that when that might not be part of their culture at all. And it was really evident. Wasn't at all within the Dalai Lama's realm. It took a real lot. And even then the interpreter had said, I've explained it the best I can, but there's really no words for depressed.
Yeah, I really understand this, and I don't know exactly how to explain, but I think the way you've put it is quite right. Is that culturally they don't experience the same things that we experience here, and Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said this at the beginning when he first started teaching in the U.S. He said, you have a lot of, how did he put it? He said, you have a lot of technical advancement here. He says, you have a lot of technical advancement here in the U.S. He said, but you don't really understand the mind very well. And so he said, I think that this is something that we can teach you, which I find really interesting. He said, this is something that we know that you don't know that we can bring to you, right? Because you can bring technological advancement, but you don't really have this peace of mind. And this is something we have a lot of. So I think we can kind of help you, with this. And later, some years later, I spoke with His Eminence Taisita Rinpoche. Thinking about this. He said, I've really been thinking about why depression is so pervasive in other countries. And he says, I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Fair enough, right? He says, I'm not sure, but I could be wrong. He said, but I'm wondering if it has something to do I'm trying to think of the right word to say because this isn't his word. I can't remember the precise words he used, but it's like it's not technological advancement, but I think it has more to do with wealth. And he said, you know, because you have more wealth, he didn't use that word, but he said, because you have more choices to make in your life. He says, you have lots. Oh, that was it. He said freedom. It has to do with the freedom of choice that you have in so many areas of life. You have the freedom to choose where you live, what your job is. You know, you have so many choices to make. And he said, and then when that happens, he said, a person can become sort of frozen in fear of making the wrong choice because you have so many. The fear of making the wrong choice arises. And he says, I can't help but think that it has something to do with that. Isn't that interesting? You know, and so anyhow, that's a little off topic, but not really in a way, because I found that to be somewhat true because when you do have more choices, there does come up fear and doubt as to whether, you know, you're making the right choice, as though there is a right choice. You know, I mean, it's like it's a movable target, you know. I appreciate you mentioning that.
And I get what you're saying now too about the movable target and the choices. And I'll just say this really quickly. Even
Sure.
in understanding so, even lately I find myself looking at emails and finding myself saying to myself, just send it. That's it, just send it, and doing things quicker in that way. So I love that you talked about the many choices. That's really fits well. Thank you.
Yeah. One of my buddies, who's a 12-step guy, he calls it analysis paralysis. You know, when you think about something so much that you just get frozen, right? Analysis paralysis. And see, here's my take on that. We have an amazing mind. Let's face it. The human mind is amazing, right? I mean, it's really amazing. It can do all kinds of stuff, right? And because it's so amazing, I think it can get tied up in itself. You see, whereas as one of my friends who's a translator said, you know, look at the Tibetans, look at the vast open space in which they live. How barren the country is in many places. I mean, there's a lot of rock and snow, you know. He says, and the sky is so huge when you get up to the top of the mountains, right? He said, it just makes you want to take your mind out for a spin, he said. This amazing mind that has so much potential, just let it relax and expand. And that's what's really interesting, because in one of the meditation instructions that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche gives, when he's talking about how to rest your mind on a form, he gives the most unusual description. He said, when you place your attention on an object, he said, let it be simple and direct. I will get to you, Lisa. Sorry about that. I'll come to you. Yeah, simple. He said, don't conceptualize the object. Don't describe it like it's a this or it's a that or it's pretty or it's ugly. He said, just allow your attention to rest on it. And he said, allow your attention to rest on it, and then let your gaze soften and your attention be relaxed and expansive. He said, just let your attention relax and expand. Let your mind relax and expand in your simple experience of the object. So I thought he said in that way, you're not like really clamping down or focusing on something, he said, but you're allowing the mind to rest within the object without getting overwhelmed by the characteristics of the object. So I thought that was kind of interesting, kind of the equivalent of letting your mind rest in in the vastness of space. So, okay, Lisa, yes.
Kira had a question.
Okay,
Kira,
sure.
Well,
do you-
along the line of making decisions, I was raised being told there there's a right answer and a wrong answer, a right thing and a wrong
Please
thing.
come here right now.
There's nothing in the middle.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And so every time I have to make a decision, which is a million times a day, I
Mm-hmm.
get really anxious. You know,
Mm-hmm.
even little ones, should I make tea or coffee? Should I
Mm-hmm.
walk the dog now or take a shower first? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Oh,
And
sure.
then, as Lisa said, like, you know, I hate texting. I wish no one would ever text me other than to time and place.
I feel you. I feel you. That's true.
And I have
I-
friends who would rather text than
I know.
even talk. And they're like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. There are people, millennials, younger people who are like, I can't, I talking even to my mother makes me nervous.
Oh,
All my
sure.
conversations are text.
Oh,
No,
sure.
not me. I don't have a
Yeah.
mother, but
Oh, sure.
so having to say, write a text is torture to me because there's no nuance, there's no verbal processing as you're,
Yeah.
or give and take, you know,
Oh,
you know,
sure.
and so the fear it will be misunderstood.
Oh,
So
sure.
aside from decisions, that's a whole other issue, being
Oh, sure.
misunderstood. But
Yeah.
so I will like toss coins, heads,
Oh, yeah.
tea,
A
tails,
lot of people
coffee,
do that.
whatever.
Yeah, a
But
lot of people do
but
that.
it's neurotic, really, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Or I'll do the Jetsam prayer. But
Yeah.
do you have any advice for
Oh, I
being
think
aligned with your decisions?
yeah, I think that you're on to something by at least recognizing that it's a situation, right? That it's a problem, right? So the idea can be, I think, introducing some relaxation and space into the situation might make it interesting. You know, like when you start to feel that tension, that my very first therapist told me something really valuable. He said, the minute you feel the tension creeping into your body, he said, stop and physically relax yourself. He said, put your shoulders down, allow your face to relax, allow your jaw to relax, just to
You're breaking up, Kathy, unless it's my earpod.
yeah, it will definitely help your situation. So that's a good start. Just physically
I
relax.
am relaxed until I have to,
Yeah.
you know, the morning to me is the worst time because that's
Yeah.
when you plan your day. And
Yeah.
if
Well,
you
then
have a
I'd say
to-do
the
list,
coins is
what's
pretty good.
first, what's second.
Yeah.
Like
I think
today,
you're,
I
yeah.
had,
Yeah. Hey,
just as an
Kira.
example, I had a fish.
Hey, Kira.
Mhm.
Hey, Kira. We're down to the
Yes.
bottom of the hour and you've asked your question. So let's try
Oh,
this.
sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yeah, we're down at the bottom of the
So
hour.
you're
And you
saying
asked the
relax
question.
first.
So here's the it's my problem, Kira. This is my problem. I give really long answers. So you'll have to be patient with me to give the rest of the answer. Haven't given it yet,
Oh,
okay?
I'm so sorry. Please
That's all
do.
right. Just hang in there for a second. Here we go. So the first thing was the physical relaxation, which you say you're already doing, which is fabulous. Then the next thing has to do with the emotional relaxation. And that sometimes helps by realizing that it is okay, everything is fine, and that those voices that those bad people said to you years ago that made you afraid to make decisions, that's not relevant anymore because you know you're grown up now. You don't have to worry about those people. You just you don't have to take on those negative voices in your own head. And if it helps you to throw coins, if it helps you to pet the dog, if it helps you to just relax your mind by throwing coins, I think there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think that over time, being able to just do those things is going to be of some help. But the other thing is living in the answer instead of living in the problem. And my buddies in 12-step tell me that the more we tighten up on a problem and say, hey, have you heard about this problem I have? I have this problem. This problem is huge. Have I told you about my problem? It's really huge. But the concretize the problem, the worse it gets. And so the 12-step slogan that I love, and I've been teaching, I'm going to be teaching on again at KTC, it's called Don't Live in the Problem, Live in the Answer. So if throwing coins and petting the dog, taking a shower, doing something out of order, for heaven's sake, it's all just fine. And if sometimes giving yourself a break and being kind and loving to yourself, you know, instead of saying, oh, I got to solve this problem, just relax into being loving toward yourself and send yourself some love and compassion, because that's what I'm doing. You know, I'm just trying to send that out because I know it's hard, but by the same token. So that's a 3-part answer. Sorry it took so long. Physical
Thank you.
relaxation, not clamping down on the problem, throwing coins and not feeling guilty about throwing coins, you know, and just being kind and loving to yourself and saying you are okay the way you are, you know. And, you know, and of course I see a therapist, so if that helps, you know, but I believe in it. And I've been, you know, anyhow, so I don't know if any of those things are helpful, but just that kindness, because that's how I feel toward you. It's like, I want you to be happy, you know, and to feel that relaxation. So that's what
I think it's more like,
okay. Well, thank you. We are at the bottom of the hour. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you sharing. He did share a quote from the Dalai Lama in there.
It's a link to a video that he did where he was asked about self-hatred.
Okay. Okay. It might not be the same thing that Wendy's talking about, but at least it gives you an idea where he's coming from. Yeah. Well, thank you. Now I know that that the program.
Hey, Lama K, so you're frozen. I don't know if you know it on your end, but if you can hear me, you're frozen. So maybe we'll end now, and Lama K will come back on in a second if she unfreezes. But
Oh, stop the recording.
yeah, that would be great. So thanks, everybody. I think maybe she's having some technical difficulties over there in Ohio. Anyway.